Good morning, everyone. Today, I'm going to be talking about this Lojong, and before we start this, we like what we usually do. We need to start from taking refuge and generation of bodhicitta, and then also offering of mandala. So you can do. I assume that you have those text, and you can go through recitations of this. The taking refuge and the generation bodhicitta and the offering mandala. And I will actually do the same in Tibetans, and now also I'm going to do. I brought my mandala here. So I will do my mandala here. This is mandala. And then after that, we will start the. I'll start talking on the topics today. Yeah. Okay. Sanje jido zoji jona la janjo bode dane je sanjo dage je zoji be zonam je ndo la bende sanje ndo bode Sanje jido zoji jona la janjo bode dane je sanjo dage je zoji be zonam je ndo la bende sanje ndo bode jo sanje jido zoji jona Sanje dola jandola choba chola chandola gindi chola chandola somla tabe kucha da chajawe batam pena shindo kuche chani tu bede payi nangu yu choda tepin chanze loy. Oy, gadala jengo choda wadera kwa choda pude jinde da juja jaba kunje lola nasa kunje mangu. Nama chanda pede. Jeda lama jebe mangu jona. Padenze lama rinpoche, dake nyinga pime tijo la, kadenje me kudenje sote, kusun tojo, mundu zato so. Padenze lama rinpoche, dake nyinga pime tijo la, kadenje me kudenje sote, kusun tojo, mundu zato so. Chejaru Guyugi Guli Lord the Bale, no Balanjo, John, Pasanje, in the New Ba Mame Ba Yellow, Color, which you Nyama Davar Buji, Do Chulena Buji, Vijan Service of Hada, me, Visual Hada may be Jubu Bamazon and Bazan, don't want that it's our that you but then Amazon. Visual Hada. Visual Hada may be Jubu Bamazon and Bazan, you don't want that in Jets of water, Jubaji, but then Amazon, not to do Java. Tojin to wait and the Jesus, or Tojin to wait and the Jesus, in Japan, number Tabana, Kiji Zayan Lot, Miji, Jinze level to the Megu, Jami Channel, Sinando show, and a very commission was a Genes on Hindi Jansu. Chavez in the Bando Dangeroji. The about the generation that Jago model like no getting to Jabba and just making to Jabba after finishing my mandala, I am actually reciting the Heart Sutra. So you just, while I'm doing my Heart Sutra, you can also meditate on the sounds of those, the sounds of the prayers, sounds of the recitations of the Heart Sutra, and what I'm actually saying, what we are actually saying on those prayers are some of those very those condensed the teachings of Buddha that he has presented in this Heart Sutra, and just by hearing those kind of sutras are meant a lot for the practitioner, and it can actually become atomic powers, like atomic bombs, throwing in the middle of those negative, the towns of negative. So the negative and destructive thoughts will then be actually shaken by these, just by hearing these kind of, such a powerful teachings and such powerful insight and wisdom is presented in these Heart Sutras. And as particularly if you were able to recite those so then that will also covers the whole, the essence of reciting Heart Sutra, and again in turn the Heart Sutra itself actually is the condensations of all Buddha's teachings, including Tantrayana. So the Buddha is capable of picking everything he knows in a simple way, in as simple as possible way. So that's why you just have that kind of strong confidence in Buddha's ability to deliver such kind of wisdom and compassion and the paths and all in even in one words. So there is a Shijin Yigijima, the wisdom perfection taught in one syllable. that is so anyway, so just have some sort of confidence in the Buddha's kind of ability. That's how recite these mantras. Which basically, literally, roughly means go beyond, go beyond, go beyond and establish the enlightenment. So which essentially, if we that's the only way we can interpret Buddha's word. But in fact, Buddha himself, when he said this, it's different than what ordinary people like us saying it. It's like very aggressive, very angry person, very mean person can say some small swearing words, but it has been packed with a whole lot of negative energies and negative kind of thoughts that were actually enveloped in that kind of one swearing word. So it's going to be such a powerful that it can invoke a whole lot of kind of angers in the other on the other side of the peoples. So it could have a lot of bad impact. So it's because of not only just the word, because of the sentiment that were actually involved while you are delivering that word outside the world. So that's how it's just a very kind of simple example that how the words are capable of doing, and how imagine if Buddha, who has the ability to transform everything, can do more than what we can think of, and something that we cannot conceive of, something that is unfathomable. Wisdom and energy and powers can actually do a whole lot of different things that we could have never imagined. So anyway, have such kind of a confidence in Buddha's words. So that's how you listen to the sounds of the Heart Sutra while I'm reciting it. Also doing those Gati Gati Paharangata Pasangata mantra will also be extra beneficial for your spiritual progress, and as well as even the protection that you are seeking in any ways, like mundane protections could also be taken care of by these kind of powerful mantras, because Buddha's teachings are not only meant, of course, the objective of those teachings are to deliver that kind of a total freedom from the samsara, but it has also the properties, ability to heal you from what is immediate problem, and sometimes even some of those very mundane problems could also be solved through the kind of your confidence in Buddha's teachings, and your confidence, your faith, your belief, and Buddha's power, and the power of the truth all together, magical things will definitely happen. And there's a lot of people, there's a lot of evident anecdotes that has happened, not just hearsay or not just a random story, but in fact we have met the people who actually feel that blessing, the protections, so on and so forth. So anyway, just have that kind of sense of faith. Okay, let me finish my Heart Sutra now. Let me start over. Humangabadala, Rajato Bandavayanda, which is a dozo to much as also to much as too much in the Jesusia, the Shin the Soa, and the Shin that the general number ship on the Moshe, but the children singing about. Majeva Manga Vajama, Vajama, that our Jawama, Kawama, Sherry, but the Damana, too much in the Suda, two men, the ship and the Jimmy. I mean, Jimmy, Jimmy, so many. Gishigami, Jenova, Jivaka, Diamata, Mareva, Mareva, Zaman, Gaji, Gaji, Diamata, the Kunjumana, Batalami, Matapa, the Sheriff of the Sherajabaru, the Jimala, the Jen, and the Son of Jabami, Betava, the Chinja, the Shida, and Yang, and the Betara to Suna Namaji, Elavana Sherajabaru, the Jibina, Ravajibina, and the Bina, and Yamana Jibina, the Mata, the Jibina. Parasanga de Bodhi, so Teatanga de Paranga de Parasanga de Bodhi, so Teatanga de Paranga de Parasanga de Bodhi. Teatanga de Paranga de Parasanga de Teatanga de Paranga de Parasanga de Bodhi, Teatanga de Parasanga. So now here, you just clap your hands 3 times, and which represents the removal of negative energies, and not only just the grosser negative part of negative energies and destructive kind of thoughts and emotions, but also the root cause of all these sufferings are also imagined to be removed, So doing so has a great significance in terms of the mental worlds, the law of the law of mental, the law of the mental world. It's make a huge impact on the mental world, and thereby, because of there is a rearrangement of these mental world, there is again there's internal rearrangements of our 5 elements, and thereby it can affect the very well-being of your health as well. So it's yeah, so that kind of imagination is quite important. You have no idea how our mind is capable of doing things. The other day I saw one of a great master doing that kind of puja, imaginations and recitation of mantra, and the other guys are laughing. He was saying, go away, Corona. And doing those some mantras, some other guys are laughing. But you cannot assume anything that's easily like that, because there is a whole lot of things that you cannot understand. It doesn't make sense to you, and it happens to any levels of our life, in all walks of life, all the different levels of the reality, things that you cannot believe in the first place, and then eventually turn out to be such an undeniable realistic. So it not only some of those things sometimes scientifically proven, not really proven realistic, but there's some other ways to see it in a different way, not necessarily using some sort of machines, totally rely on some of machines. But when when it comes to the mental world, the mind is capable of doing a whole lot of things that you could not imagine right now. And once you developed your mind, and once you attain the ability to see things, then there's a whole new world you can see, whole new things you will be able to perceive. You will be able to kind of directly in contact with. This is not when you become crazy or hallucinated. but there is a systematic ways to get there. And from Buddha all the way down to the masters and to all the way to the temporary grand masters, modern times still. Existing masters have some of those ability to actually to access, to tap into some different world than that what we usually actually engaged in, what we usually see. So anyway, so anything could be possible, and you cannot draw a conclusion that easily. And you at least need to have a sense of possibilities of such kind of healings, you know. So with that mind, you just do the clapping your hand. And again, there's a lot of scientific research done on the abilities of the mind, how actually it can change some of the elements in other sentient beings. In, you know, if you think of someone, how then the brain, the what do you call this? The waves and the kind of the warmth, that the energies around the brain, around the people, around the wherever you are, you know, located in, wherever you, however the mind has been perceive you as, can actually sometimes make a little difference. Even some of those prayers are also have healed people through the strong wishes, sending prayer, strong wishes. They healed some of those sick people. That there's a lot of this kind of evidence in the story, and also you know, there's a whole lot of things that I couldn't finish here. So anyway, so long story short. Our mind is capable of a lot of things that we cannot imagine. So with that mind, you just clap your hands with the mantras and remove the negative energies and the negative thoughts as that actually exist as a root of all the negative other kind of activities or negative experiences, negative situations that we always find ourselves in. So with that in mind, you just I recommend you to do that clapping hands with that mind, with that kind of healing, with that kind of motivations. Deyadanga de paranga de para sanga de gudi so amaba kunju sunju kai dembe to jembe de cho tamje che do ko ju jembe ko ji sho ju dage ba jembe de cho renge ba tamje shindin guru so ha. And also, but not only just for yourself, but your families, friends, and fellow human beings and all sentient beings. So just same things. We are actually in the same position where we are looking for happiness without missing a single second. We are looking for happiness, and we never even want to hear about the sufferings for ourselves. So all the sentient beings are one. Actually, they are not isolated. They are not isolated in that sense. We are one in that kind of common the common wishes and the common kind of struggle that we always engage in. We always striving. So. And again, this it will benefit other sentient beings for sure, because particularly in Tantrayana world, the mind is capable of travel, and when mind think of something, their actually mind is forming things there. When you think, when in our mundane world or in our ordinary mind, we tend to think that the physical world is outside. And mind is something invisible. But the mind, the imagine that mind can have is nothing different than the physical things that exist out there. Physical things, if you closely, it's nothing that kind of, it doesn't require that deep wisdom. But simply by close, kind of observation, you will see the things exist in a totally different way than we thought them as a very solid. So just if you go, even the sign of course, this the physics, the kind of quantum physics world talking about this kind of elusive natures, sort of elusive natures of the things. So it exactly exists in that way, and eventually you will find not just believing that believing in those elusive things cannot do much for your practice, but studying them with wisdom, understanding of the reality, then you will eventually see the ultimate reality. A lot of levels of realities are there that eventually, ultimately, things exist in that elusive way, which is nothing different than the imagine that pops up in our thoughts. So, having such kind of imagine is almost as exactly same as actually happening outside what we call physical things. So that's why mandala offering, imaginary mandala offerings and imaginary things that we imagine serving other sentient beings in that particular way has actually um, meritorious kind of meritorious again, just almost like we actually doing it. So it also in compassion generations there is a wishing compassion and also engaging compassion. So it also part of wishing, part of the practice of the wishing compassion, which is eventually climaxed with engaging compassions. And without having this wishing compassion, there's no way you could have generate or develop that kind of engaging compassion. People sometimes tend to say, just feeling compassion, love has nothing to do with actual doing. You gotta do actual things, and you just forget about this doing meditations and compassion, which is absolutely irrational and nonsense. If you look at how mind works, you may be able to do some sort of charity things, works for the other sentient beings, the other people, help a little bit. You feel unconditional love, but there's a lots of obstacles you may face, and eventually it will come back to normal selfish mind. See, in order to break through all these hurdles, all these possible obstacles for your compassionate activity to be fully employed, fully, kind of grown, you need to start with a little bit of selfish thinking, how it benefits to self, helping others become part of your help, your happiness. And if you were able to make that helping others' happiness become part of your happiness, then there's a combination of selfish and other concerning. Once you were able to blend this together, then you will never give up helping other sentient beings, no matter what, to the detriment of your life. So that's why starting with that sort of selfish involvement is quite important, and then eventually get rid of that selfish part and go on going forward with the pure compassion, unconditional love. Unconditional love will only be born with that kind of procedure. Otherwise, you may tend to feel unconditional love for a bit, and then they will going to disappear after you find this. Let's say you're helping poor people and you feel so compassionate, and one day he messed up, he or she, kind of rebels, and then do whole mischievous things, and then you give up on sentient beings, on one sentient beings, on that particular sentient beings. Once you give up on any sentient beings, no matter what kind of mentality or mischievous or evil things he or she may actually did, once you give up on that particular sentient beings, any sentient beings, then this would never be the compassion or great compassion that the text and Buddha has recommended for you to make progress in the path to the enlightenment. So otherwise, just general compassion could be developed, could be failed experience by anyone, but the kind of this not radical but sort of inclusive compassion, very inclusive compassion that knows no discrimination, that knows no discrimination against any sentient beings. So that kind of compassion. All right. So I try to include part of my, kind of my talk with that practical sort of clapping hands as well. So anyway, it's Tibetan. It's called Dokpa, the removal clapping or something like that. Yeah, usually we clap with our hand. We usually applaud someone doing something good, achieve something good. But you don't have to do this in that context. And we do have kind of situation where we clap hands to scare away people, like clapping hands. So one things could be used in a different context according to what is needed at that particular time, at that particular process of the things. So here we are using clapping our hand as a gesture to remove our negativities, because these physical, verbal, mental, all these, our, the any possible means that we are possessing, we have, are actually kind of harnessed together and to perform something in a meaningful way, in a drastic way, in a kind of effective way. So that's why physical gestures are quite important to shape your mind. Sometimes there are some, some practitioner, some people doesn't like to do all these physical things, but tend to think that the practice is all about the mind. But yes, it's all about the mind, but it's shaping mind. So it requires environment. It requires a whole lot of things to be able to do that. If you were able to do that without in the need of these things, then maybe it's a different case. Otherwise, for beginners, in general, these are quite important. Physically, verbally, engaging in the doing the practice. All right. Oh, de ada anga de nga de baranga de bara sanga de bodhi zo de ada nga de baranga de bara sanga de bodhi zo de ada nga de baranga de bara sanga de bodhi zo de ada nga de baranga de bara sanga de te ada nga de baranga de bara sanga de zo te ada nga de baranga de bara sanga de ada nga de baranga de te ada nga de baranga de bara sanga de te ada nga de baranga te ada nga de baranga de bara sanga de bodhi so ha ba gu ju de ka yin be de je men de be jo dam je cher do ba jo je ne ba jo je so da ge ba ju men de be jo nge ba dan je je de go ra so ha te ada nga de Yeah, so the third attempt, you just be confident, be so confident that all the negativities were gone, fears, panics, and stress, and all these the negative energies that we create ourselves, or that has been that has been spells on you, or whatever that you believe in those negatives are coming from. Particularly in this time, all the people in this world are going through such a kind of such kind of hardship, such kind of tough time. So let's share our healing energies with them as well, and imagine that all these negativities, all these kind of root cause of negative energies or infections, this pandemic infection that the causes that infection, that pandemics were also removed from all the human beings, all the sentient beings. The root cause of all these things were also removed, and have some sense of a total sense of relief from there, because it matters. It matters a lot, because you are contributing to the healings of a universal problems. So that's why it's quite important to have that positive mindset as well. Okay, let's just spare a moment in breathing. Breathing in, breathing out. Bring your awareness to the breathing, and let your thoughts and the sensations as be as normal. Don't force anything, don't judge anything. Let go and just observe. Just observe without judgments, and be still, be present. Just enjoy this quiet moment of breathing and sensation inside, and feel welcome back at home. That's where your home is, which is quiet, which is pleasant, which is full of actually joy, which is free of sufferings, which is free of chaos, which is free of all the kind of the distressful, all the kind of anxiety, all the kind of the, the chaos that we actually go through are actually not present in the core, deepest core, the presence of your authentic self, which is free of all those afflicted thoughts, all these negative, destructive thoughts, which is actually the cause of all kind of problems that we face in our day-to-day life. So the basic fundamental nature of ourself is actually devoid of all these destructive thoughts, foggy minds, destructive, all kind of destructive, negative kind of thoughts are not there, are actually, it's devoid of those negative thoughts, and it's pure, clear light energy, and that actually has the nature of joy. You can actually feel the tremendous joy is there if you choose to enjoy that joyness and turn away from the heaviness that we tend to lift with us and that drag us away. If you let go of them and want to be present, and want to be still, want to be in the now with that full of joy, then you can feel that joy. That's your ultimate home. That's your ultimate natures. That's why we have, from Tantarayana, we have the talk of the unions of bliss and voidness. And that's why Dharmakaya, that's why the Dharmakaya is said to be the ultimate, your ultimate self, which is actually the union of bliss and voidness that has been designated as me, I. Okay, thank you. Coming back to normal human beings from Dharmakaya. Let's do human things for now. So, what was the topic I was supposed to be talking about? Okay. So Lojong, yeah, Lojong, why it is important, how does it work? So Lojong is actually Lojong in Tibetan. Lojong means, of course, Lo means mind. Jong means actually training. Jong can be interpreted in many ways, but particularly here, Jong means training. Jong could also mean that clarify something, clean up something. Could also, Jong means, for example, Sayong Jong, Sayong Jong Ba, Timat meaning the removing the kind of stains. That means removing the impurities from your mind. You separate your mind from these impurities are also said to be Jong, Jongba. So here, Lojong means also it needs to have an element of that removal of impurities at the same time, training your mind. So it's put in this together. Sometimes if you put two words together, then it makes actually a different, it make a different sense, but not completely different. It needs to have a sort of the elements of the root, where the word actually comes from. And while carrying that kind of the meaning of the root, it also actually gives you a different meanings, which is which is not completely different, but a different. So that's why Lojong is essentially, Lojong means mind training. Mind training, training your mind, train your mind. So the people that mind training, I think the mind training, the word itself, the Lojong, it's quite important. I think it actually tells a lot, actually. You know, in the Western philosophy, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I heard that of course, there's a lot of kind of philosophies on the phenomenology, on the phenomenological works. But when it comes to things like addictions, like drinking alcohol, and you know, like any other negative thoughts that we developed, and over time we developed the negative thoughts and then become very aggressive, and then even though we know those thoughts are very negative and those thoughts are very destructive, and it has no kind of good things, you know, it may end up, it always end up in some kind of negative things, negative consequences for you and in others, but still you tend to carried away by that kind of the current of that negative thoughts. And then even though you know this is bad, but you become so submissive to it. Then I think they find it very funny, and they find it very strange because mind knows it but still doing it. So then there's no solution. They did not find solution. That's what I have heard from, you know, some of our friends. So then, you know, there's a specific name for it. What do they call this? Yeah, theory of change. Theory of change. So in order to undo that kind of, you know, mental habitual, you know, kind of this kind of habitual patterns that you developed, in order to undo that, the training of, you know, mind is very important. The training of a mind actually gives you the theory of change. I think it will give you the answer to that question. So why, even though mind clearly knows the detriments of the you know, engaging in that kind of mental activities, even though mind knows it, but still following it, in order to redo it, in order to undo that kind of mental, you know, mental tangles that we are entangled. In order to undo that, we need to train our mind to undo that. So that's why mind training. So train your mind. You need to train your mind. It's not enough merely knowing this is not good, but there is a lot of applications and means to bring back your mind to that kind of normal levels again and again, over and over again. You apply those principles from different angles, and not only because the mind tends to lose its kind of enthusiasm, its kind of its interest when you relies on only one reason. But that's why we need varieties of reasons, varieties of means and principles that we can apply from time to time in order to create the excitement for the mind to approach and go forward, to fight, to battle with those kind of negative habitual patterns that you have developed over time. So in order to undo that, you need to constantly fight against it. then eventually there you will be won over that kind of negative mental patterns, habitual patterns, and gradually, it takes a time, but gradually, sometimes you may disheartened by this daunting sort of mental task that even though no matter how hard you apply those principles, it doesn't works. It seems to be failing, and you then decided it's doomed to failure, but it's not. Okay, so anyway, that kind of mind training actually is a theory of change. It's actually the one of the maybe I will say the only way to kind of remove those negative thoughts, to clean your mind, to separate your mind from those kind of impurities that has been blended with our mind, and it stayed there for such a long time that we cannot see the difference between our mind and those negative thoughts. So that's why the Lojong mind training is quite important. Now then, you might have heard this Lojong a lot, and people tend to think this Lojong is different than the philosophical studies that philosophical studies. And because I came across some of people that believe that you just practice Lojong, or just think of something and knowledge comes and Dharma comes, and you don't have to study. That some of people have that tend to have that kind of beliefs, but it's not quite right, because Lojong doesn't comes without studying, but a study without Lojong cannot be fruitful for the practitioner. It perhaps it will be like making cake, cupcakes. You may learn how to make this, how to prepare this cake, this kind of cupcake. Maybe you learned it from in a kind of academic course or something. And other guy maybe learn it from experienced person. But eventually the point is to make a good and delicious cup of cake, kind of cupcake. Sorry. So eventually the thing is that the purpose of all these things is to make a good and delicious, this cupcake that you are supposed to be, prepared. So the point is to make that cupcake, but it comes from one guy comes. The experience comes from exposed to the experienced people. Another guy, his talent comes from the academic course or whatever course he did. So it's just like that. The Lojong practice actually you practice with more experiential teachings, without actually going through this kind of system of studies. But eventually you need to get to the same point, like the cupcake. You should be able to prepare this cupcake delicious and aesthetically done, So either way, you have to train your mind. You should be able to tame your mind. You should be able to reduce the negative part of your mind and embrace the positive part of your mind. So that's the point. So that's why Lojong practice itself may involve a lot of related to stories and related to more experiential things that sometimes philosophically rejected, but which is basically fine. We need for a practitioner, for to be a good practitioner, the purpose of studying those philosophical kind of academical this philosophy is to train your mind, to tame your mind, but through in a very, very extensive and very, very kind of how to call this, from a very academical way. It's when I say academical way, it's not like a Western, kind of our regular academic way. But when it comes to mental academical way, the academic itself is become a practice, because these were actually designed in such a way that actually unpacked the whole system of the mind in a systematical way, and that become a kind of academic. And when you go through when you actually study those mental world, and just every moment when you know the different parts of your mind working in the different ways, the knowing itself is actually tames your mind. It's like knowing. It's like knowing. It's not like knowing how to construct, how to build a house. It's not like not just like that. But since it's a mental world, knowing and practicing is no difference actually. Protects knowing itself become practice, because awareness is actually lies of foundations for your mind to go ahead with what you actually established already, and become to internalize it and make it habitual pattern, make it include it in the habitual patterns, so that it become inseparable, indivisible part of you, and from where you emerged as enlightened beings, as a bodhisattva, as a arhat, or whatever the kind of the levels that you may end up, attend. So then, the Lojong, the term Lojong, it's become more widespread particularly during the times of Atisha, during the time around Atisha, and of course Milarepa. And it's not quite something totally new. It's something. Of course, it's a Tibetan word, but this kind of Lojong practice is also, you can tracing it back all the way back to Nalanda University as well. So let's say, for example, Bodhisattva's way of life, guidance to the Bodhisattva's way of life, Junju. The Junju itself is a Lojong practice as well. So Lojong are mostly written in a it's actually presented in a way that doesn't require a lot of philosophical debate applications, which is again a more experiential, or which is a kind of a loosen, more relaxed sort of practice that doesn't require that strict sort of rules, strict kind of the philosophical application. But again, then if you're a Lojong practitioner, you should be able to. Lojong practice again. Lojong practice itself going to lead you to back to the philosophical establishment as well. it's like you know something and you're good at it. Let's, for example, creating something, some machines, and you are studying it on your own, and you study it, you spend all your life, and you know a whole lot of information about it. You know, you know, you can, you develop, you can, you know, actually um, create something totally new that, you know, that is very useful for the people. Then what possibly could happen is that you could have actually write a book on it, actually to write not only just a book but text. You can write a text on it, and it could be included in pedagogical curriculums in the schools, and you study it, it's become academic. So it's that's how this you reconcile this philosophical study and Lojong together like that, because like this analogy of that I just indicated, I just gave you, like Mallory, for example, he did not actually attend some sort of this academic studies, you know, institutions, you know, but he learned everything. He learned everything from his master, who spent more than 30 years in India, particularly in Nalanda areas. And Malariba learned all of his practice from that type of master, that kind of master who has more than academic knowledge. You know, actually he, you know, actually he himself, the master, Mahayana himself, is a great, I would say, academician. And in terms of Buddhist philosophy and Tantrayana, academically learned. So, but eventually, when it comes to this experiential level, then it will be expressed in a song, in any kind of writings, any kind of, you know, arts that you actually put in those arts. So it's become part of Lojong's practice as well. So eventually Lojong will lead you to that kind of sophisticated understanding of the philosophy and all these things. And the philosophy study also eventually leads you to that kind of a Lojong practice. So it's intertwined. One cannot survive without the other. So that's why Lojong practice needs to be understood in that way, so that you won't be seeing these two are totally two different entities. It's two different things. They are basically same, but presented in a different way. Maybe some of those who are less likely to approach the Dharma through philosophical understanding, they're more likely to do the Dharma from Lojong practice, like Lojong. But eventually it will lead to that kind of sophisticated understandings of philosophical establishment. So one can actually, when you look at the Milarepa's songs, published in the books nowadays, when you look carefully at those Milarepa's songs, you can actually include these Milarepa's songs as a commentary for the sum of a very sophisticated philosophical text. Also, some Kagyu master has also written used Milarepa's song as a commentary of the Chandrakirti's book of Madhyamika, Umajupa, Madhyamika. Yeah, his engagement, Chandrakirti's engagement to the root wisdom. Yeah. So so that's how it has been. It eventually comes at the converging point where, because there's no other options to the enlightenment. There's only one gateway to the enlightenment. You need to go through that one. So the approach might be choosing a little bit different way, but not entirely isolated a different way. But they are relatively isolated, all right? So here, relatively isolated, meaning that it presented in a little bit different way, but essentially the same thing. So that's why, again, if you were able to combine these together, then it's going to be such a promotive, such a kind of effective, because our mind is capable of, because our mind is capable of, negative things, negative thoughts. The study of our negative thoughts itself become academic. The academic is nothing different than actually what is going on in our mind. So that's why studying the mind and then approach in a proper way, it's very important. That's why academic is quite important. Then experiential understanding also support that kind of approach. Experiential support, experiential practice, experiential understandings of the mind also actually become an extra bonus for that kind of philosophical approach. Essentially, we need both of them using together. So that's why you shouldn't deny the other one while you are practicing. You are kind of following the one, following the Lojong. You cannot deny the other philosophical studies, because that clearly shows that you don't know the philosophical understanding. Because once you know what is philosophical understanding, then you will never be able to depreciate that kind of studies, believing that the Lojong practice is better. You cannot differentiate these two together, because the very purpose of a Lojong practice is to tame your mind. It needs to gather any kind of possible means to tame your mind down. So that's why you can choose any instances, any stories, any evidence that you may find, and also you can actually relate to philosophical understanding. So that's how this needs to be going together. And while you are practicing on the Lojong, basically for the practitioner, for those who academic training, who has academic training, you won't see the difference actually. But it's mainly from those who never trained in academic way. They will see some difference because the presentation is a little bit different. So, yeah. So anyway, so I will take some questions. You can ask any questions. Doesn't have to be related to this topic, because I thought that this period of the lockdown, you might have a lot of things that is going on in your mind, and you want to, I assume you have lots of questions. So I will take some questions, and then we'll see where it takes us. Okay.
If anybody would like to ask Geshe a question, you can just unmute your microphone and just ask directly if you like.
Unmute. I don't see. Everything is just black here. Yeah. So it's funny. I'm talking to this machine.
Doesn't seem to be any questions, Geshe. Everyone must be very happy. There don't seem to be any questions.
Okay, I hope they're not sleeping. Yeah, I hope they're not falling asleep. You can ask any question. I said any questions. You don't have to be nice, because sometimes some of the things that you don't agree with, because our mind is tend to kind of hold on to a lot of things that we the kind of our common beliefs that the world taught us. Many of them are contradictory to what Dharma says. So clearly you need to have that kind of puzzle needs to be solved. So I believe there are some sort of questions, but sometimes it sounds a little bit, kind of not very nice. So that's why you maybe rather, keep quiet. You choose to keep quiet, but no, you don't have to. Just throw it. Just throw it out. Just throw it out from your chest, and I will be. I'm passionate enough to handle those comments and questions, and I think it would be good for some other sanghas who are listening. Also, it would be beneficial how I react, how my answers. Sometimes it could be very beneficial, and it could be sometimes life-changing answers for you, because sometimes it's not that I'm such a talented master, but I have a lot of I have a lot of masters who say those things, who train in that way, and that all the dharmas that we have been exposed to are actually sometimes become quite simple for us, and sometimes they make a better sense to your life, and that way you will be able to respond to your life in a better way. And it doesn't mean that I'm such a really, really great qualified, but I'm just echoing what I have seen. I'm just a messenger. It's coming through. A little bit left in between, but it's coming through. I'm just delivering it. So that's why if you have a question, that would be good. I would love to answer some of your questions. And if you don't, again, that's fine. That means you're happy. That's what you're looking for.
Geshe, I could ask a question. While everybody's been under lockdown, it's a very unusual situation, and where the normal pattern of our lives has changed quite a lot, and we find ourselves, stuck at home and having to do things we don't normally do, and the change in pattern sometimes causes problems with our practice, so that it can seem a little stale, or maybe we feel we're doing something that in a way we haven't done it before. How do we make sure that we keep a freshness to our practice and the way we do things? Because a lot of aversion and frustration can build up with being confined, and that can reflect in the way we feel about the things we're normally doing, and they don't seem very worthwhile. And we find it difficult to understand why we're doing some things. If nothing seems to change, we're just stuck the same thing every day. So it can be a little frustrating when we're used to going to work and things like that. So how can we keep that kind of freshness in our minds and apply that in our practice?
Yeah, I guess that's the question that everyone has. Thank you for your taking your responsible for others to kind of throw that questions out. Yeah, it's funny. I've seen not actually actual people, but I've seen some of videos, and also some of on social media that they actually often express how kind of frustrated, frustrated in this kind of the lockdown situation that you find yourself in. But see, it's funny that, okay, let me think this way. You may have noticed that I haven't used the words like human catastrophe and the lockdown where we were so caught up in frustrations and this coronavirus, COVID-19, somewhere affected and people dead. I've never mentioned those things. I have a reason for that. Since I saw this a lot of people who actually, because of this lot of negative things going on around the world, and exposing too much to that kind of negative, fear and panics, and the world is enveloped, the world is covered, the world is surrounded everywhere. Once you open the social medias and radios, every other 5 minutes you will be hearing these kind of negative words, negative things, and it also adds a lot more kind of pressures on your mind. So that again contributes a whole lot, it contributes a lot to your mental, kind of stability, your mental agitations or your mental kind of your mental busyness and your mental unrest. So I'm just trying to make it worse. Yes, you are locked inside your house, you're stressful, and on top of that you have a whole lot of negative informations. And of course you will find yourself in such a kind of terrible situations that is horrible and that is torture you deep in psychologically and physically. You're torturing yourself. It could happen to many people, and many scientists also suggest that don't actually listen to some of those social medias where they're talking about this the coronavirus problem, even the word itself. Just try to stay away from and do some meditation, yoga, and just try to forget about those things. Otherwise, it will deeply psychologically affect on you. That's yeah. So anyway, the thing is that for a practitioner, from practitioner perspective, it's quite simple. It's not that. Yes, there is a scientific finding that too much exposure to negative these problems that may affect on your mind. Yes, there is a scientific evidence which are based on they do the research with some with some what you call control group, experimental group, and then that sample needs to be then infers to the populations. Say you have 100 people, 200 people control group and experimental you've done some experiment on it, and then the group of 100 people's outcomes has been applied to all the populations. And in that 100 people, they don't have a practitioner. So that's why it is set in that context. So for the practitioner, remember, Buddha taught Buddhism. The first thing he taught is about the suffering. Let alone hearing about the suffering, we need to meditate on the suffering. So how do you then reconcile these two together? Again, we need to hear more sufferings. So the practitioner shouldn't look at suffering the way that non-practitioner have seen it, have experienced it. It's logical that non-practitioner will feel that pressures at home, feel that kind of heaviness on hearing these kind of problems everywhere. Why? The biggest reason, when you look at the mind, there's something wrong from their attitude. The way how they look at the problem is totally in a way that is not realistic, actually, even not scientific way. Let's say it's like this: we put ourselves in a box, and that doesn't have a exit door or something. It's like put a lot of pressures in the balloon, and if you keep putting pressures in the balloon, what's going to happen? It's going to burst, So that's what is likely to happen. But if you have another ends on the balloon, the pressure goes through and leave from the other side, right? So then there's less pressure in it. In the same way, the reason we meditate on suffering is to see the natures of us, one of our natures, the natures of samsara. And our nature is not suffering actually, but natures of samsara that we are in. So you are actually practitioner's point of view. We have been in this samsara for millions of lifetimes, suffering. And now once you take this body, samsaric body, it is signed up when you've been born in human beings, in any forms in samsara, you automatically sign up with that kind of suffering. Suffering that is, at the very least, suffering of birth, death, agings, and sickness. These are the natures of our body now. Yes, there is coronavirus, all these fears are, kind of circling around. They could be even worse. Because it's a samsara, and we need to get rid of this suffering. And when you look at the suffering, our body itself is a recipient, as a receptors of the suffering. So once you have the receptor, so suffering is going to come. If you are outside of this samsara, then you may not feel that pressure because you're outside the samsara. When you goes in the samsara, of course, suffering is going to happen. Even worse, you can expect even worse. So when you see this nature of samsara, you meditate on the suffering because in order for you to understand the nature of suffering, its nature of suffering, samsara is full of suffering. We need to get out of this. That's the idea. That's the attitude that you have to develop. You need to see the light on the other side of the tunnel, so that you don't feel so depressed. You don't feel despondent. If you close up that tunnel, no lights at all, then there's a depressed, then there's hopeless, and it could lead you to a deeply psychological kind of defects of psychological damage that on your mind eventually manifest into your physical world. In that case, scientists are right. But from the practitioner point of view, you need to see the light. That's where you should be going, but you are in the darkness. There's a suffering, yes, it could be even worse, but there's a way out. So that's why there's a hope. There's no total loss of hope. You see the light on the other side of the tunnel. That's how you should be actually approaching. Yes, that's why you see it's very nature. Let me give you one example. The other day, one of our fellow monks was interviewed by some of those people, some of those media people, and how to cope with the suffering. And there's some other couple, the kind of panel discussions, virtual panel discussions. One of my fellow friends, monk friends, said, "You shouldn't be surprised. It could happen," and he gave a lot of kind of stories about it. But then the other guy, and also said that after a while he was explaining what is happening in around his areas. It's in US, and he said, "It's unprecedented. I've never seen such an empty street. I've never seen these and the Manhattan, the kind of hub of this business and the tourism are now kind of empty, like a abandoned city, like a kind of virtually deserted." He said these unprecedented things, and eventually he realized that the other monk said, "You shouldn't be surprised." He said, "Oh, maybe some practitioner, maybe they see it's like not as surprising, but basically it's a very unprecedented. It's something that it surprises you." So when you look at it, when I see this kind of things going back and forth, I realize how our untrained mind like to cling onto the normal beliefs that we all have. We like surprise, want to be surprised, all right? So it's unprecedented. It's never happened. I'm shocked. That's what the untrained, mundane reactions that is quite known to our world now. So even that kind of surprise, kind of shockness could also affect on your psychological calmness, because you're shocked. It shouldn't be happening, it happened. How the hell it's going to happen? What is going on in this world? Whole lot of emotions then comes out from there, right? It again only tortures you, which is not a realistic way. Let's see. You don't have to have a whole this kind of whole lot of this knowledge or practice. But in a simple way, if you think carefully, if you want to choose look at differently, it is not surprising because the street is empty. Let's say for example, the street is empty. It is used to be a very crowded place. It's now empty. The whole city is become empty. And when you look at only that scenario, and your mind once you would like to surprise it, then your mind comes up with a story that another scenario. You create another scenario that there was a lot of people and all of a sudden they were gone, and you'll only focus on that part. You only took that part. But if you logically or if you want to choose the attitude, to have an attitude that sees more relaxed way, then you can approach this way. When you see this kind of empty cities, and the reason is that they are empty because there are no people. The people are not there because people are keeping indoors. Once there's no people coming out, then there's no people. That's logically it's going to be like this, right? If there's a people, if there's a crowded, if these people were gone, then it's empty, right? Why it is empty? Because people were gone. So people were gone from there. That's why it is empty. Why people were gone? People were keeping indoor. Why people were keeping indoor? There's a virus coming out, and they were going to infect them. That's why they're keeping indoor. If you're looking at logical way, then there is a less shocking. Why the virus comes? It comes from other part of the world, and this world, and it's traveling from here to others, And there's, you will see the whole bigger picture in the connectivity. And because of this cause, it happens. If everyone keeps indoors, city is going to be empty. Don't be shocked. You expect that in the simple logical way, in a realistic way. But since we choose to be surprised, then we're stuck in there, and you get this kind of surprise, you get the shock, and then that will lead to some more depressing thoughts, lead to more and more depressing kind of your mental kind of whole lot of other mental emotions that it will eventually bombard you with. So it's a very simple way of looking at it. So then, yeah. So that was something that I found, how our mind, how our mind actually try not to look at things, not try, just so caught up with whatever resources that we have. We only utilize those. We're not able to unleash the wisdom part of us. That's what I'm trying to say. That's why I keep it indoor. Of course, again, there is a great takeaway. The way how we react to the keeping indoors. For the initial couple of weeks, maybe it was such a kind of a great moment for the whole families getting together. And then actually that is something that you were looking for. You always were busy. You don't have time. You don't have time. You don't have time with your kids. You don't have time with your partners. And that's something you wish for. Do you want to spend some more time? That's something you're always looking for. But you are so busy. You have to go out. And then once you get the time, what happens? After a while, you lose that kind of novelty, right? So all the happiness in this universe, in this samsara, is just like this. There's no eternal happiness anywhere you go. You go out, when you sit inside, you find the other places are better. Sitting too long here, you want to go there. And you enjoy a little bit, and it's going to be, start boring, and you just leave and another place. Like we have a saying, grass is always greener on the other side. So that actually clearly actually demonstrate the understanding of the truth of suffering. When Buddha says truth of suffering, it doesn't mean everything is suffering. It does have a flavor of happiness, pleasantness, but it has the nature of suffering. It will eventually lead to the suffering. So instead of blaming on these and that things, the restrictions or the virus and a whole lot of other things you want to point out, why don't you just point it in? I am the reason. That's me is sitting here experiencing, and then eventually the novelty won out because it's the nature of my experience, not necessarily outside, because it's the nature of my samsara. If you want to get out of that kind of problems, you need to do the practice of Dharma. Okay? So that's why you can understand these things in a totally different way. Want to be with my partners, and just be with her, like, and spend a whole lot of time, and then eventually that kind of the kind of happiness that I was expecting, I projected. Once you have this and that done, you get this happiness. It's not there anymore. I I want to spend all my time with my kids, and then again it's going to be end up becoming source of another problems. So there is no ultimate or eternal happiness in samsara whatsoever. So knowing the nature of all these things, you need to turn yourself towards Dharma, practice Dharma. So then, obviously, it's very obvious, and also practically, people feel kind of stressful to be locked inside for such a long period of time. It's quite, if you are not a practitioner, if your mind is not capable of seeing the things in that way, then it's going to be a little bit difficult, particularly if you are a person, what do you call, extroverted kind of type of person. You always like to go out, hang out with people, and talking and shaking, and hugging, and so if you have that kind of mentality, because it's not easy for our mind to actually settle down with some magical understanding all of a sudden, because the patterns have been built for a very long period of time. So that's why if you are at that kind of stage, in that kind of situation, then you will find it quite difficult. But again, you should trick your mind. You should keep your mind busy. Of course, reading, yoga, meditation, a lot of things. And why, if you're a practitioner, why you don't do the mantras like 5 mondos, like 500,000 practice of 5 mantra recitations, prostrations, why you just get yourself busy with those kind of practice? This is a perfect opportunity for the practitioner. Of course, if you don't do that and still expecting something, then it's a different. That's you put yourself in that situations. If there's no willingness to take on, to face the challenge and to move on, then no one can do nothing. Even the Buddhas cannot make you do things. So then, if you're not a practitioner, again, you can do a whole lot of things: exercise, meditation, just general meditation, and yoga. And again, still there you might have, I saw the other day, the one lady in her comment section, she said, it's too much. I want to see my relatives, my friends in flesh, not in the screen. That's kind of frustration. You build that kind of frustration. Because, like I said, you don't see the light on the other side of the tunnel. Focus on that light on the other side of the tunnel, and you pass the darkness with meaning in it. All right? Live with the visions, not with circumstances. All right? So you got to put some effort. Otherwise, if you want to have some, only rely on the circumstances, live only at the mercy of the circumstances and expecting circumstances to fix you, then no one can help. If you're extrovert, you're extrovert, you need to go out, you need to bang the door, that's what you're going to be doing. The introvert may be good and fine for a couple of weeks, and then eventually you also need to see someone in flesh, not kind of in the screen. So you just, it's time to reflect on that kind of reality, that kind of, because things exist in the multifaceted natures, and you need to be approached in a multidimensional ways. And just in order for you to kind of have that sense of approach, you need to at least step back, take one step back and think and give yourself a time to reflect on it, and then start approaching from it, having the kind of understanding, having the kind of beliefs that it's going to be over soon. It's going to be over anyway. So there is and also if you can, let's say, most of you guys maybe experience a lockdown. But when you look at those other people who only lives hand to mouth, they don't even have a proper food to eat. They go hungry for all these lockdowns, and they may end up losing their jobs and losing their everything. That could also happen to many other peoples. They don't even have a proper shelter. They don't even have a bed to sleep, comfortably on. So thinking about these situations as well, and the place you are living, the times and the environment that you are enjoying is a paradise for them to look up to. So again, from that regard, you also feel calm down your mind. All right. So there's many ways you can approach. All right. Yeah. So there's many ways you can understand the situation, calm down yourself. And if you are a practitioner, then I highly recommend you to do those mantras 100,000 times. Just determine, just sit, set a time. Set a time for it. In the morning, daytime, evening, and you can busy. Not only just make good use of this time, but to advance your practice to the next level, right? So that's the thing you can do. And also, if you don't want to do that kind of mantras but you can read books. Not like the stories, other kind of stories, but read the books like Lamrim text or Lojong text. And set a time for it, read them. And the morning and the evening session, you read them, it will keep your mind fresh. It's definitely going to keep your mind fresh, right? So, I don't know, other than that, of course, you watch movie, Netflix. You have Netflix, and Netflix, they double and triple their subscriber over the couple of weeks. So I believe that you also kind of have access to, of course, you have access to Netflix and other platform, which is not bad. Enjoy them as well, because we are human beings, and we are our mind has been programmed in that way, and it also helps a little bit. And don't be so hungry to have that kind of socially involved out there. Just it's going to happen someday, very soon. You don't need to see the things that you normally see. It could happen. It's very much possible. And, we need to leave this world without having anyone, and that time will also come. That is even worse. If you are not prepared for this kind of small isolations, then there's no way you could have prepared for living alone forever. So we need to think about these things as well. Meditations on the death, impermanence, and the suffering nature of the samsara. All right. I hope I answers your questions, and thank you for asking that questions. I think it's very relevant to this this period of time, this period of kind of lockdown, and people feel so isolated. And which also we can also see it's a great lesson for us actually. So you are now able to appreciate. We recognize how socially involved is important. When we say about prayers for the well-being of other sentient beings, clearly you can take a whole lot of lessons from them. You need people. You even need the people who sometimes annoys, you have a trouble with. You need to see them passing troubles you. And as yesterday BBC, listened to BBC, which also reported on the animals in the zoos. They were also they were also feeling so kind of lonely. They need people to look at them, and they were actually looking out from their the windows and from their cages, from the So they also feel some sort of desperate to have that kind of contact with people. So we are social animal basically, but we need those connection, but not to the detrimental of our kind of strength. Mind needs to be flexible. We need sentient beings, of course, but not that urgent, not that immediate. When it comes, it's fun. But of course, in order for us to become enlightenment, go to the Buddhahood, and also we need sentient beings. We always rely on the sentient beings for our journey, for us to make our journey meaningful. And the very purpose of practice is to actually make a connection with the sentient beings, but not that kind of frustrations way. But this kind of period also teaches us how we are so connected. When China sneezes, the world gets flu. that's very beautiful, lines that are. So the worlds are connected. Yes, there's a bad peoples, in every corners of the world, but most of the people are beautiful. Most people are so, you can hear this terrorist and all this, negative things going on in the Middle East and everywhere, but look at the innocent people. How beautiful are they? How beautiful they are actually. Majority of them are so innocent, so nice. Yes, they say things in a different way. They have they probably they're thinking a little bit different way, but essentially looking for the happiness and try to get rid of the sufferings and try to be happy for themselves, and they wish others to be happy as well. That's the very nature of us. So whole world, you should be able to see it in a positive way, how we are connected to all these sentient beings, all our fellow human beings out there. We need their connection. Devoid of their connection, sometimes psychologically affect us. And knowing that and have the appreciations of that kind of our kind of interactions with the other sentient beings, and kind of the society, appreciations of the existence of this society, how the people who it's not just enough to have your friends coming by, but you need the people. You need the people. You need to activate, because we are so relying on them to have that kind of sense of secure and sense of feeling being a human. So that's what most of the people's going on in mind, most of people. And look at that mind. And when you look at that mind, mind itself tells a lot about how we are connected to sentient beings. And now you don't need to feel that frustrations, but know that we are connected to others, and how others are kind of valuable for my happiness, and try to say prayers for them right now at this moment. And why don't you start saying prayers for them? And at the same time, you see the light on the other side. That hope. You have the hope. Never lose the hope. And determined that this is going to be over. Yes, things going on beautifully before, and all of a sudden, it ceased in a very kind of in a very drastic way, which is very terrible because it's impermanence. It could happen. Now we in this stage, and it's not forever. It's going to change because it's impermanence. Good news is, yes, bad news is impermanence, but good news is impermanence. I like that line. You probably heard of that line as well. So just, try to shape your mind, whatever the knowledge and wisdom that you have, So particularly in the morning, in terms of thinking about these kind of things, particularly in the morning, it's very important for you not to be affected by those negative thoughts, particularly in the morning. Keep your mind clean, in the morning, and if possible, practice meditation, and keep yourself busy doing prosterations, mantra recitation, reading Dharma books, or a story, maybe a nice story, that stories about one guy helping other people, or one society helping other society. This kind of something that tells the meanings in life, something that presents present the meanings and love, compassion in it. So that actually allows your mind to have that kind of sense of loving compassion. And once you have that loving compassion, sharing, your sense of concerning about others, sense of wishing good things for the others, fighting these type of problems with others, and looking up at the positive things, outcomes, looking at expecting some good things that is surely going to happen. So that's how you shape your mind. That's how we approach. That's how we actually look at these problems jointly with others, and then that release your mind. That feels actually that feels more connected with others. All right. So you tell your mindself. You should tell sometime your mind to yourself. You should talk to yourself sometime that's the connection. That's the better connection than physically touching, physically hugging, physically being there. Your mind are wishing good things for these fellow beings. That makes a connection for you, and that makes you feel less lonely. And if you are able to keep that kind of mentality, then it will tremendously release you from that kind of sense of isolations. So anyway, turn these self isolations into self realizations. All right, thank you. So if you don't have any questions, we conclude these sessions with some dedication prayers. And like I always said, start with bodhicitta, taking refuge, an actual session, mandala offering, actual session, and then if there is a confession prayers, then we will do that. For now, I don't think it's already 12 o'clock. I'm not gonna skip that part, but we do that dedication part. Okay, if you have any questions, I will take that questions, try to answer as much as I can. If you don't, then let's conclude these sessions with dedication prayers. And I hope you have those texts ready, dedication, and you just read those dedication with having the meanings in your mind, proper reflections. Okay, what is it? No question. No question, no nose, no mouth, no head, no mouth, no question. If you have no mouth,
Can't see any.
you haven't got mouth, you haven't got questions. What? Excuse me?
Sorry, Geshe, I can't see any questions. So I think you can go ahead with the dedication.
You can see, you hear questions. Huh?
No, can't hear.
Just
the-
Just kidding. All right. If you don't have a question, then that's great, because that means I made my point. I did my job. All right, let's do this dedication. Like I always said, dedicate your whatever the meritorious activities that we have engaged in. It surely accumulates a good, kind of good virtuous energies, good karmas that we have accumulated, meritorious karma, meritorious energies that we have created over the couple of hours. We not only keep that for ourselves, we need to share it with our families, friends, and fellow sentient beings, particularly those who are in desperate conditions. They need prayers, they need healings and blessings. And if we jointly wishing good for them, it will definitely going to make a difference in them. So it's the saying prayers, wishing good things. It is not entirely kind of nonsense or entirely not going in vain. It has its significance. It has its own way of fixing things. You just have to feel confidence. You just put trust on that. Invest your trust in that, because you never know what mind is capable of doing things. So anyway, dedication again, not only reaching out to others and become kind of healings for them, but also it more than them. It also affects positively on you and multiplies whatever the good things that you have accumulated. So that's how it also are win-win situations. It also a kind of that we win-win situation, that if we are actually we are win-win situation that we are in, that we are trying to kind of engaging in. So that's why let's jointly dedicate whatever the meritorious we have accumulated to the well-being of all the sentient beings, including your own spiritual and physical well-beings. Okay.